Hello and welcome viewers, I am Pia and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is set to visit Washington DC this week for talks with US President Donald Trump. Zelensky will also meet US energy and defense firms and discuss Ukraine's Tomahawk missile needs. US, Egypt, Qatar and Turkey have signed a joint Gaza declaration backing a ceasefire deal. Mediators signed the document alongside US President Donald Trump. China previously reacted to this proposal but has made no further comments since then. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent stated that US President Donald Trump remains on track to meet Chinese President Xi Jinping in South Korea later this month as the two countries try to de-escalate tensions over tariff threats and export controls. Bessent stated that there were substantial communications between both sides over the weekend and more meetings are expected. US and China have rolled out special port fees on shipping firms registered in both countries as the trade war between the world's two largest economies expands. Now, the US first announced this fee earlier this year, and China has levied reciprocal fees for US-linked ships in its ports. But now, EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas has announced that the European Union will allocate 10 million euros to help establish a special tribunal to prosecute Russia's crime of aggression. She has also pledged an additional 6 million euros to support Ukrainian children deported by Russia and survivors of sexual violence. Torrential rains that inundated Mexico last week have now killed at least 64 people and 65 others are reported missing after this tropical depression triggered landslides and flooding in parts of the Gulf Coast and central states. US President Donald Trump will be visiting Malaysia on the 26th of October, and the Malaysia and the United States will facilitate the ceasefire between Thailand and Cambodia, which will require both sides to remove all mines and heavy artillery from their borders. And Foreign Minister Mohammed Hassan has stated that President Trump is looking forward to witnessing the signing of this ceasefire agreement. All right, viewers, those are the headlines and our top focus. US, Egypt, Qatar and Turkey have signed the Gaza Declaration at the Gaza Peace Summit in Egypt. US President Donald Trump, along with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, the Emir of Qatar Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan have signed a declaration meant to cement a ceasefire in Gaza hours after Israel and Hamas exchanged hostages and prisoners. Now, the summit has also been attended by several world leaders, including UK's Keir Starmer, French President Emmanuel Macron, Canada's Mark Carney, UN Chief Antonio Guterres, Italy's Giorgia Meloni, Spain's Pedro Sanchez as well. World leaders have posed for a family photo at the summit as well. We'll try to put that photo up in a while, but in the meantime, President Trump has stated that this peace summit and the signing of the document is a tremendous moment for the world, and that the document in itself is very comprehensive and lays out rules and regulations. Listen in.
Everybody, this is a tremendous day for the world. It's a tremendous day for the Middle East. And you can see that this is probably the greatest assemblage of countries in terms of wealth and power maybe ever assembled. And it's just an honor to be a part of it. We're going to be signing a document that's going to spell out a lot of rules and regulations and lots of other things. And it's very comprehensive, but we've already signed documents in the Middle East and having to do with Israel and Hamas and just about everything else.
Meanwhile, Egyptian President El-Sisi has stated that the Gaza deal opens a new era of peace and stability for the Middle East. He's also added that Egypt will host a conference on the reconstruction of Gaza. Listen in.
وستعمل مصر مع الولايات المتحدة وبالتنسيق مع كافة الشركاء خلال الأيام القادمة على وضع الأسس المشتركة للمضي قدما في إعادة الإعمار للقطاع دون إبطاء. ونعتزم في هذا السياق استضافة مؤتمر التعافي المبكر وإعادة الإعمار والتنمية، والذي سيبنى على خطتكم لإنهاء الحرب وميلاد بارقة الأمل في أن يغلق هذا الاتفاق صفحة أليمة في تاريخ البشرية ويفتح الباب لعهد جديد من السلام والاستقرار في الشرق الأوسط.
With us on the broadcast is Professor Rohan Gunaratne, International Affairs expert, joining us from Singapore. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. We've witnessed history with the signing of this deal, with the exchange of the prisoners and the hostages between Israel and Gaza that had taken place yesterday itself. There's a lot of jubilation on the ground, but also cautious optimism, because there are concerns whether this fragile peace will hold or not. What's your assessment? Are we seeing now the ceasefire that has come into effect probably setting the tone for ensuring peace in the Middle East in the long run?
Yeah, you used the correct term, cautious optimism. So there is euphoria that this is the very beginning of the resolution of many disputes in the Middle East. The moment to transform the Middle East from a region known for conflict to a region of peace. So the Palestine conflict is the oldest wound in all these conflicts. So I believe that the first phase has now been completed, which is the return of the hostages. The second phase is the most challenging phase, which is the disarmament of Hamas and its associated groups, because I have been looking at the statements issued by Hamas and the other groups, and they are unwilling to do that. So President Trump will have to work with Egypt, with Qatar and Turkey, as well as other countries, to ensure that the terrorist groups that staged the October 7th attack is disarmed, because as long as those groups are active, there will be no peace. Of course, the third phase is one of demobilization. That is, these groups will demobilize and a respectable government will start to rule Gaza, where they will not do terrorist attacks, will not go and abduct people, will not go and kill, maim, and injure people, will not go and burn people. So, but I believe that what Trump has achieved, no other leader has achieved in recent times. And I also want to commend the Arab and the Muslim governments, Turkey, Qatar, Egypt, UAE, and also the Western leaders that came for this meeting, the Canadian leader, the French, the British leaders, the Spanish leaders. So I think that this is a turning point of peace for the Middle East.
Indeed, and what do you make of the optics of what we've seen, because right in the center of the large table that was put out, Trump wasn't there. It was the Emir of Qatar. Why do you think? Because Trump, of course, we do know that he's been, talking and giving due credit to himself for this particular deal. And people expected that he'd be like right in the center signing that declaration. But it was the Emir of Qatar who was accorded that position. Why do you think so?
It is because it is only the governments in the Middle East that can ensure that Hamas and those groups will disarm, because currently Hamas leadership is located in Qatar. So naturally these leaders will have to be put under severe pressure for them to comply. These are extremist groups that have killed, maimed, injured people, staged suicide attacks. So it's not like dealing between governments. These are groups that need significant pressure. So those Middle Eastern governments that have the authority that have the gravitas can work with these groups. So Trump was very smart, and Netanyahu was even smarter. Netanyahu was invited for this meeting, but he didn't go for this meeting because he knows the challenges facing those Arab countries, those Arab regimes, and the Muslim regimes, that is Turkey, of working with these groups and telling them that this is not the way for you to live by killing and maiming and injuring and raping and abducting people, but to live respectable lives. So I think that Trump understood it. He's a very clever man. He's a deal maker. I know there's a lot of criticism against Trump, but this certainly is something where the US president, US government, and those governments that participated in the summit should be praised for.
Requesting you to stay on with us, sir, as we're tracking some further updates regarding the summit itself. US President Donald Trump has also declared that now peace is being achieved in the Middle East. French President Emmanuel Macron has hailed the summit as a historic day after the release of hostages in Gaza. He stated that world leaders are now preparing to engage with the United States and Israel to ensure international monitoring of the peace operations. Listen in to what both leaders have said.
Together we've achieved what everybody said was impossible. At long last, we have peace in the Middle East, and it's a very simple expression, peace in the Middle East, and we've heard it for many years, but nobody thought it could ever get there, and now we're there.
C'est aujourd'hui donc une vraie avancée, une étape décisive. Maintenant, nous nous sommes aussi mis en ordre de marche pour préparer la suite. Et donc, dès demain, poursuivre les opérations humanitaires telles qu'elles ont commencé, mais les accélérer. Avec une coordination euro-arabe qui sera faite. Et nous allons engager avec les États-Unis d'Amérique et Israël pour nous assurer qu'il y ait un suivi international de ces opérations, parce que le grand danger, c'est qu'elles puissent être régulièrement bloquées et que l'aide humanitaire puisse accéder dans les meilleurs délais, en tout cas continue de se faire en temps réel avec les...
Meanwhile, Brazilian President Lula has also welcomed the declaration, and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has called the summit in Gaza historic, stating that the ceasefire is a real tribute to President Trump. Listen in to what both leaders have said.
Segunda coisa que eu estou feliz é porque antes tarde que nunca, finalmente, parece que se encontrou uma saída para o conflito Israel e o palestino. Me parece que há muitas possibilidades do acordo ser definitivo e eu acho que isso é muito importante. Não se vai...
It's a historic day, and it is a real tribute to President Trump that he has got leaders to this position. This has been tried for many, many years, and stepping away from the personalities, this is a huge relief for hostages and their families, huge relief for civilians in Gaza, all of whom have been through unimaginable grief.
Still with us on the broadcast is Professor Rohan Gunaratne. Sir, we've seen what these world leaders have had to say. All of them have been echoing one thing, that what we've witnessed is history. Does this moment then at least open a window towards a two-state process down the line? Because we've recently seen several European nations recognize the state of Palestine too.
Yeah, I am very happy that you played that clip because it demonstrates two things. One is, for many Western countries, it was unthinkable that there will be peace in the Middle East. But the Arab countries and the Muslim countries of the Middle East and elsewhere also believed that it was unthinkable. But Trump has done it. He has used pressure. He has used force. He has given various incentives to various governments so that these governments will ensure that there is no return to war, there is no return to conflict. And that is all because Trump is a very unconventional leader. He's a deal maker. He's a businessman. He's different from other statesmen that have a certain protocol and a procedure to engage in negotiations, in mediation and in arbitration. And this is the result of thinking outside the box. But certainly phase 2 is a major challenge. It requires an Arab voice and an Arab face. And that is what Trump has done by giving the first line of leadership in phase 2 to those leaders that came for the summit from the Arab and the Muslim world. With regard to the two-state solution, let me share with you that the Western leaders made a huge mistake by trying to acknowledge a two-state solution without a deal. This was a mistake. But now Trump has again engaged those leaders also and told them, look, there can be peace in Palestine in the future. He is no longer talking about this establishing a Riviera by moving out the Palestinians. So I think that these Arab leaders have also engaged Trump and explained to him what is good for the world and what is good for the Middle East.
All right, so with that, I would like to thank you for taking out time and speaking to us on NewsX World. With that, viewers, we're shifting focus away from the Middle East towards Europe. Now, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is all set to travel to the United States to meet President Trump later this week. The meeting will take place as early as Friday. President Zelensky has stated that he would also be holding talks with defense and energy firms and members of the US Congress. He's further said that the main topic of discussion will be air defense and long-range capabilities. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump has issued a statement emphasizing that the war between Russia and Ukraine could end immediately if President Zelensky intends to rule out reclaiming Crimea. President Trump's statement comes as Ukraine is seeking further US assistance to protect its electricity and gas networks, which have faced attacks from the Russian side. US President has also ruled that an immediate ceasefire plan could also be brought into place and has pushed for a peace deal to end the war. He's been making this effort. He's also earlier, remember, met Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska in order to realize this. With us on the broadcast is Mr. Gilbert Doktorov, International Relations and Russian Affairs expert, joining us from Moscow. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. Interesting statement coming out from Donald Trump. He said that the war could end immediately if Ukraine intends to rule out reclaiming Crimea. How major of a shift is this in the US policy?
It's not a great shift. The problem with this, that I see in his proposal and in his meeting in several days with Zelensky in Washington, is that Donald Trump is trying to, or plans to, use the template of his latest success in the Middle East as a solution for reconciling the parties and bringing an end to the war in Ukraine. But he's overlooking a few things. Most importantly, Russia is not an Arab Gulf state. Russia is not an Israel. Russia is the world's largest owner of nuclear missiles and very advanced military hardware. He's also overlooking the character of Vladimir Putin. Putin, unfortunately, has been obsequious, has played into the hands of those who think that Russia can be dominated by the West as it was in the 1990s. That is very unfortunate. But the consequence on both sides of Trump's misunderstanding or misjudgment of the situation between Ukraine and Russia versus what he's just done in the Middle East, and the problems with Mr. Putin's very poor understanding or reaction to what Trump is trying to do, will be World War III. If Trump provides Zelensky with the hardware he's seeking when he arrives in Washington, we will be well on our way to World War III, because that Mr. Putin's wiggle room, his ability to continue to ingratiate himself with Washington, is coming to an end.
Indeed, sir, requesting you to stay on with us. We're tracking some other very crucial developments. European Union's Foreign Policy Chief, Kaja Kallas, has stated that the EU has decided to allocate 10 million euros for the establishment of a special tribunal to investigate Russia's crime of aggression against Ukraine, as she's put it. She's also informed that 6 million euros have been allocated to assist Ukrainian children deported by Russia. She's further called on other member states to fund the special tribunal so that work can really start on full scale. Meanwhile, she's also reacted to the possibility of the United States sending Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine, emphasizing that Ukraine knows best what their needs are. Earlier, remember, President Zelensky met with Kaja Kallas and they discussed recent Russian attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure and the need to bolster Ukraine's energy grid and secure it against these barrage of attacks. However, Russia has warned of a very firm response to any action by Europe against Russian assets. Still with us on the broadcast is Gilbert Dr. Rao. Interesting statement coming in from Kaja Kallas, but will this allocation of nearly 16 million euros help Ukraine, or is it just another PR move, just another statement for the optics?
I agree with that characterization. This was a PR stunt. It has no real bearing on the fate of Kallas. As the chief diplomat of the EU, is the worst possible person in that post. She is viciously anti-Russian. She uses every opportunity to stoke the fires of war between Europe and Russia. From the other standpoint, her trip to Kiev a day ago was an example of what the critics of Mr. Putin are saying on Russian television and privately behind closed doors, that she never should have been allowed to make this European tourism, as the Russians call it. Kiev should be under constant bomb attack and should be so dangerous that fools like Kallas don't dare to go there. This is one of the biggest issues. Russia is very restrained, but the restraint is coming to an end, and it could be an explosive end that we will all regret.
Indeed, as you've aptly put it, it is important for the European Union, for the United States to tread very carefully. Thank you so much for taking our time, sharing your analysis of what's happening on the ground as far as the Russia-Ukraine war is concerned. Meanwhile, we're tracking further updates. Russia is now urging Pakistan and Afghanistan to show restraint after days of deadly border clashes which have left dozens dead and has also halted trade. Now, Moscow's foreign ministry has stated that it is closely monitoring the situation and welcomes signs of de-escalation, calling the development a stabilizing process. This call comes after similar appeals from China, Iran, Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Remember, fighting erupted on Saturday night when Taliban forces had retaliated against Pakistani attacks in Kabul. They had fired at Pakistani outposts, which of course occurred, as I mentioned, in retaliation to blasts in Kabul and Paktika. Now, both sides exchanged gunfire, artillery, shelling had taken place as well, and drones too were used to attack each other well into Sunday. Now, Pakistan reports that 23 soldiers have been killed and has claimed to have killed 200 Taliban fighters. Meanwhile, Kabul has countered, stating that it killed 58 Pakistani troops. Meanwhile, the border remains shut with hundreds now stranded. Islamabad has warned that future provocations will face a befitting response while insisting that it values dialogue. Afghanistan has meanwhile emphasized that they will not back down, and they will also provide an equal response to what Pakistan is doing, and their territory, sovereign territory, cannot be violated. With that, viewers, we're shifting focus to more news coming in, this time from Mexico. Devastating floods in central and eastern Mexico have killed at least 64 people. 65 others are still missing and rescue efforts are being intensified. Torrential rains triggered landslides, destroyed roads and bridges, and have left dozens of communities cut off. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has stated that 10,000 troops, helicopters and boats are deployed to reach stranded residents and deliver food and water. Civil defense officials say that Veracruz, Hidalgo and Puebla are the hardest hit states. In Hidalgo alone, 43 people remain unaccounted for. This disaster has unfolded rapidly, with the death toll rising sharply in just hours. Shelters, meanwhile, are open. Rescue operations are continuing round the clock. Well, viewers, that's all we have for NewsX World. Stay tuned as we track further updates.